Why do we speak the way that we do? Well, I'm Alice Loxton, and this is Here for the History, the show where we unpack the origin stories behind the traditions and stereotypes all around us. And this week, we'll be looking at the English language. We'll be asking questions like, why do we use the word cow for the animal in the field, but beef for the food on your plate? Why do we have such strange spellings and weird pronunciations? And we'll be tracing the social changes and the invasions which shape how we speak today. So let us know what you think by leaving a comment. Make sure to tell all of your friends and click like, hype and subscribe so you never miss out. So Ben, it's a Sunday lunchtime, you're out with your friends and you're having a Sunday roast. It's a great time of the week. I want you to imagine that a waiter comes over and they ask for your order. In that moment, what do you say?
Well, roast beef, of course. Bit of horseradish and maybe a few pints of lager on the side.
A good order, a good order. But the point is there that you said roast beef and not
roast cow.
Roast
yes,
cow.
Very true.
And this is one of the strange quirks of the English language, which we're going to investigate today. There's all sorts of them. So there are a lot of words which have absolutely no correlation really with the letters. So things like night, which has a K-N at the start. You never hear knight. Or things like enough, which end with a G-H, but you actually say the F sound.
Yeah, and on the other hand, you also get words which are spelt the same, but are pronounced differently. So you've got like food, good, blood.
Yeah, which all have double O.
Yeah, it makes me feel very sorry for foreigners trying to learn English. It's a very difficult system.
So today we're going to try and make sense of these strange quirks, because actually there's a fascinating history behind them. We're going to look at 5 different sections. These are what I've come up with. Frenchification, the Great Vowel Shift, the Age of Shakespeare, Dictionary Mania, and Language Today. None of this will mean much to you at the moment, but it will soon. It's a fascinating topic, and you'll never speak the same way again, I can promise.
Well, I'm intrigued.
First up, Chapter 1, Frenchification. We're going to start with the Anglo-Saxon period and start with a pretty important year in British history, 1066, which is famous for the Norman Conquest. So this is almost 1,000 years ago. And at the start of the year, the people of England are speaking Old English. Okay, so this is based in Germanic languages. During the Anglo-Saxon period, the kind of centuries before 1066, there were people coming from Europe, from mainland Europe, tribes like the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes. I mean, this would have sounded very different to how we speak English today. So they even have different letters. For example, there's an A that's attached to an E.
Yes, I've seen those.
That's a letter in itself. So
is it called ash?
It's called ash, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
And words that we use today would have existed, but would have sounded completely different. So work might have been wealk, woman would have been withman. So very, very different. And lots of words we use today, like husband or handiwork or king, they all come from this period. So really, really ancient origins.
And we get our days of the week from this period, don't we? So we've got, I'm pretty sure it's the Anglo-Saxon moon god, or the name of the moon is Mona. Then Tiw, or Tiw, gave us Tuesday. Woden gives us Wednesday. Thunor, or Thor of Marvel fame, gives us Thursday. And then Frigg, Friday. Saturday, I think, is still the Roman god Saturn. And then Sunday is the Anglo-Saxon god of the sun. So there we go.
Impressive.
We're speaking Old English every day.
Impressive knowledge, Ben. Okay.
Well, I try.
So that's where we are at the start of 1066. But this is a big year. It's the year of 3 kings. Do you want to talk us through it briefly?
So 1066, we have the Battle of Hastings, and the background to all this, as you know, every child learns at school, is that Edward Confessor dies. He was the King of England. And then you've got this power struggle between Harold Godwinson and the Norman king, William the Conqueror. Now, the Normans are obviously in northwest France. So William comes across the channel, fights Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings, and supposedly Harold gets shot in the eye. Obviously slightly disputed, but that's what we see in the Bayeux Tapestry. And at the end of it all, William of Normandy emerges victorious. He sets up his own Norman kingdom in Britain, and that, I'm guessing, massively changes the history of the English language.
Absolutely. And this is why we've called it Frenchification, because it is with the Norman conquest that the English aristocracy is replaced with a new Norman elite. And there's all sorts of ways that England changes at this time. They build these amazing castles and architecture and so forth. But a big thing is the language used by this new Norman elite, which is essentially French, Norman French. So the key point here is that the Old English of the Anglo-Saxon world was rooted in Germanic origins in Germanic languages. But once the Normans come over, it really changes the English language, and we have Middle English. And that is the merging of the Norman elite language and the language of the Anglo-Saxons to create something completely new. And so we suddenly have the elites speaking French and the ordinary people speaking Old English.
Yeah, there's a big divide, isn't there?
And this is a really important point in the development of English language. So ordinary, mundane versions of objects have Anglo-Saxon origins. So things like cow or pig or sheep.
Yeah, the language of the farmyard.
Right? Yeah, so the language of the farmer. But then the people who consumed it were the elites. And so they would refer to it with words like beef or pork or mutton, which have French origins.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Once it's served to the aristocrats at their table, it gets this fancy French name.
And you see it a lot in law as well. So the Normans brought a lot of legal changes. And so words like judge, jury, plaintiff, defendant, attorney, lease, all of these words have their origins in this kind of change in the Norman period.
Yeah, it's very much a kind of language of power, isn't it, that they bring? And that fits because they're bringing this new powerful administration.
So Dr. Joan Beal, who's this amazing English language professor, she said a way that you can see this in language today is you can think of a word and then think of a kind of more sophisticated version of that word, and that has the French origin. So if I said to you, get, take the word get, like I want to get something, what is a more polite way of saying that?
Like memory's going blank.
Obtain, that's it, yeah. And that has origins in the French, which is obtenir.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Which is
obtenir. A very good accent, Alice.
Yeah,
you must be fluent. It's like having a real Norman aristocrat in the room.
Okay, well, let's try. Thank you, Messi. Let's try another one. Smell. Okay, if I said the word, there's a smell in the room.
Surely, odeur.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Odor.
So there we go. And here's another one. I'm going to build a new village.
Construct. Construire.
He's
Do you hear
good.
that?
He's
Yeah.
good. He's good. There we go. So it is actually amazing that you can try it out in all these different ways.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I like the Norman Conquest still kind of shapes our perception of class a lot in the country today, because you've got the language you pointed out, but there's also, I remember a bit of research coming out a few years ago about Norman surnames. So it was saying that even today people with Norman surnames are still on average wealthier than the Anglo-Saxon parts of the population. So that's, Norman surnames are things like Glanville, Darcy, Mortimer, whereas your Anglo-Saxons ones might be more based on, say, their vocation, like a Smith or a Shepherd or something like that, or a Loxton, I imagine. Loxton sounds pretty Anglo-Saxon to me.
Do you think?
Do you know?
Rude. I thought it could have sounded like Norman
Rude?
French.
I'd say that's a sign of your good, your humble sturdiness, Alice.
What about Henderson?
Phlegmatic in the face of.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, fine. Well, you've recovered yourself then.
Well, I think Henderson is Scottish. It's like an ancient Scottish surname.
It must be son of some.
Yeah, I think it comes from son of Henry or son of Hendry. Now, I'm not sure who Henry was, but he sounds like a cracking bloke.
Yeah, sounds like a legend. Yeah. Okay, well, let's fast forward. Now, towards the end of the medieval period, we get to the era of Middle English. So this is the time of Geoffrey Chaucer. Chaucer lived from 1343 to 1400.
Author of the Canterbury Tales.
Author of the Canterbury Tales, and probably visualised best for people our age in the film A Knight's Tale.
Oh, I didn't know that was actually based on Chaucer.
Well, no, he's in it. Paul Bettany is the character in it.
Oh, really?
He turns up as a classic writer's
I had no idea, because I haven't watched it for 20 years.
Yeah,
so I had no idea he was playing Chaucer.
He's the one that's naked. He
I remember
naked.
Paul Bettany in it, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I just didn't know I didn't put two and two together.
Yeah, it's Paul Bettany naked is Chaucer. It's obviously full of, it's very accurate.
Well, Chaucer did like his rude jokes, so that kind of fits, doesn't
I think it works. I mean, I actually think it is quite a good representation. But the point is, it's a time of, in a very basic way, knights, monks, castles, jousts, all that kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
And what about language? Well, at this point, we're in Middle English, and again, it would have sounded very different to English today. The big difference, they think, is that the vowel sounds a bit longer.
I read a couple of examples where it was things like heath, for instance, was more like haith.
Okay.
Yeah, and breath was more like braith. So there's a few examples, a few tasters.
Chapter 2, The Great Vowel Shift. Between the 1400s and the 1600s, we have this thing called the Great Vowel Shift, which is a kind of geeky name historians have come up with.
That's an epic name.
Yeah. And it was a process that led to a very striking change in pronunciation. So, for example, bite would have actually originally have been beat. So it changes from beat to bite.
Okay, interesting.
The emphasis of the vowels really changes across the country and, varies quite a lot in different regions.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this. I was doing some research and I didn't understand before that this massively affects particularly the southeast and London. The Great Vowel Shift is most pronounced there, but it's far less so further up north. So this explains some of the regional variation in language. So you've got in London, people started pronouncing the ow in house, and that's where that comes from. Whereas up north, particularly say in Scotland, you still get hoose. And so this is responsible for a lot of those. I just find it so interesting how these kind of key events back in the past still influence us every single day.
Yeah, I mean it's a confusing thing, the Great Vowel Shift, because people don't really know why it's happened. We've heard about Frenchification, which gives us different vowel sounds, but a big event some historians have looked to is the Black Death. So this is this terrible pandemic, and this is part of this great spread of the bubonic plague in the 1300s. And it's estimated that a third or even half of the population died. So huge societal change. And what that meant was a shortage of workers. And that meant a lot of people moving around the country and bringing their local dialects with them. And some people say, did this change the alchemy of the English language? Perhaps.
Okay, so these kind of dialects have been developing in tandem, but then they all get mushed together in this great vowel shift caused by the Black Death, and that's what creates this change in pronunciation. Some
people say. So the point of the Great Vowel Shift is that there is this variation in pronunciation happening over this 200-year period, and I suppose we're departing from looking at a word and reading it letter by letter in a way that might have happened in Old English. But a big moment, and someone I'd like to introduce you to, is the famous William Caxton, who was famous for bringing the printing press to England in 1476. I don't know if you know much about him.
I do a little bit. So Caxton is basically, he's a merchant, he's a diplomat, he's a writer, and he become very successful in mainland Europe as a businessman. And he works in a bit in printing then, which is then a relatively new technology. The printing press had only recently been invented. But he crucially brings printing to what is now Britain. He sets up the first printing presses and publishes the first books in English, which is, an absolutely huge moment in our history. But the trouble with this, though, is it's actually terrible timing. Because if you think about it, you've just explained that Britain at the time is going through this massive period where people are changing how they pronounce words. Right in the middle of this, Will Caxton pops up and he says, right, I need to spell the words in my newly printed books, which are then being distributed around the country. He takes a snapshot in time and starts printing these books. But all that does is record spelling as it was at the time that he started printing them. The problem is these pronunciations around the country continue to change for at least a century or two after him. And so that's partly why often the spellings don't match the pronunciations in English. And it has a huge effect that's lasted right down the centuries. It's amazing. And Caxton is very funny as well, because there are certain elements that are brought in. You can tell his European heritage is involved. So he had previously been working, obviously, in mainland Europe. And lots of the people who are skilled in printing were Flemish. So he brings some of them over to work on his printing presses in London. And they would introduce certain elements of their own language into the English language when they were working out how to spell things. So one of the examples is the H in ghost, which probably makes no sense to anyone when you think about it. But that's because that's how it was spelt in Flemish, and they introduced it that way. So there are all sorts of interesting things, but it really has had a profound impact on our tricky spelling in English.
There we go. Well, on that ghostly note, thank you everybody for joining us. Don't forget to like, hype, comment and subscribe, and make sure to tell all of your history-loving friends, because there's a lot more to get through. Okay, Chapter 3, the bit about Shakespeare. We're now going to jump forward to the reign of Elizabeth I. She's one of the great queens of English history. She's known as Gloriana for some people. She ruled from 1558 to 1603. So we're at the end of the Great Vowel Shift at this point. And we've got a little snapshot of the English language through the speeches that she gives. She's a brilliant speech maker. One of the most famous was at Tilbury, which is when she was standing on the banks of the River Thames, and there were all these troops gathered waiting to confront this terrible threat from the Spanish, known as the Spanish Armada.
Of course.
You might have heard of.
Gosh.
In the year 1588. And you have to remember that this was a time that people were very fearful of a Spanish invasion. So Elizabeth is really seriously rallying the troops here and, upping morale, if you like. And what's interesting about her speech is that we can understand it perfectly well. So it's really shifted from Old English and Middle English to be something that's more recognisable. And I've actually got a bit of an extract from the speech. Can you do your best Elizabeth I impression?
Oh, yes.
Imagine you're on the cliffs.
I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too. And I think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm.
Yes, that is exactly how she spoke, for sure.
Maybe that was Margaret Thatcher. Maybe I got confused.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. The point is that language is really, really important to her, and she makes these amazing speeches. She's a great kind of diplomat, I think. She would have been a great diplomat or a lawyer in another life. But the other key thing about her is that she was a patron of the arts, because the Elizabethan age is also the great age of William Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
Our greatest writer. And Shakespeare made a massive impact on vocabulary. There were over 2,000 words that he added to our vocab, which we still use today. So words like leapfrog, courtship, indistinguishable.
It's so ballsy just to keep adding words, and people clearly, they caught on, didn't they? So it's remarkable.
Well, I mean, it really just demonstrates how much he has infiltrated the English language. There's so many phrases as well, like, I've not slept a wink, cruel to be kind, the world is my oyster,
Yeah.
star-crossed lovers. So all of these things that we use day to day are all kind of thanks to Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's amazing how, people might have absolutely no idea about the heritage of what they're saying, but Shakespeare kind of infuses our conversations every day.
And another key thing at this point is that there's a huge amount of religious change and upheaval. So this is the time of the Reformation, the establishment of the Church of England. And with that comes a lot of the biblical texts, the religious texts being rewritten.
Probably the most famous at the beginning of the 1600s. We've mentioned Shakespeare's already done a lot of that, but ones like in the King James Bible, you have long-suffering, scapegoat, peacemaker, or phrases like go from strength to strength or see the writing on the wall. So again, it's just infusing the language and crucially distributing it now for the first time, because we have these books being printed, and when it's all done in a kind of regular language across the country, that begins to forge a kind of national identity almost.
Chapter 4, Dictionary Mania. We're now into the 1600s and 1700s, and people are writing a lot of books about the English language, about the grammar, they've got pronunciation guides, and we get our very first English dictionary. This is an exciting moment.
Wow. God. This is why people are tuning in.
Yeah. So the first English dictionary is published in 1604, but it only contained around 3,000 words. The most influential early dictionary must be the one by a man called Samuel Johnson. He's the son of a bookseller, so maybe that makes sense. But he's quite a famous man who sort of loves life. The famous quote from Samuel Johnson is, "When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life, for there is in London all that life can afford." So that's why he's this wonderful insight into the 1700s. And his dictionary is described as one of the greatest single achievements of scholarship ever. So that's quite a claim. It was 43,000 words and definitions, and it was published in 1755.
And one thing about the dictionary I particularly love is it has all these quite witty definitions. It's not just like a really boring one you read online today. They're quite amusing how he defines things, aren't they?
Absolutely. I've got a few examples here. So we've got lexicographer, which is a word I can't even say. Lexicographer.
Yes.
That's a man.
That's obviously what he is. So this is why it's funny.
Noun. It says, this is his definition: a writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge that busies himself in tracing the original and detailing the signification of words. We've got another one here, dull, adjective. And he describes that as not exhilarating, not delightful, as to make dictionaries is dull work.
I particularly like, there's one here from about the definition of oats. And he says, a grain which is in England generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people, which made me chuckle.
I'm not sure the Scots would like that. But there we go. So this is a snapshot of the 1700s, of 1755, the language at that point. And what's quite interesting is that, as well as being quite humorous, he could have taken this opportunity, I suppose, to overhaul the system, to realign the differences that might have happened in the Great Vowel Shift, in the variation of pronunciation across the country. But actually, he kind of embraces it. And all of these quirks are, again, cemented in the English language, now printed in text. And with Samuel Johnson comes another man, Thomas Spence. So with the dictionary, we get other figures who also create pronunciation guidebooks and pronunciation dictionaries, which really is an insight into how much the pronunciation was varying at that point.
Yeah.
So his comes in 1777, and it's interesting because he's got quite radical political views. That's what drives him to do this.
So is it quite egalitarian?
Yeah, so he's basically saying, which lots of people might say today, is that he felt that not being able to pronounce words correctly was holding people back, and it's a disadvantage in, say, polite society, I suppose.
Yeah.
So this was to really help people understand how to fit in, if you like.
That's so interesting because, I mean, it's a disadvantage today. I think most people would agree. But at least today you can look things up online, that kind of stuff. You'd have the television. Then they would have no other medium. So he's doing quite a heroic service for a lot of people.
Thank you, Thomas Spence, for stopping us all making faux pas here and there.
I'm now interested to find out, Alice, how does that bring us to the present, though?
Well, glad you asked. Chapter 5, Language Today. So we've had all of these changes and these invasions and these great vowel shifts, but we're now in the 1800s, and a great writer of the 1800s was someone you might have heard of, Jane Austen.
Of course.
And what's interesting is when you look at a Jane Austen novel today, you can actually understand it quite easily. Not only do we understand her prose, but she writes in a way where characters use kind of day-to-day phrases or things like, So one of her characters, Miss Bates, who's a figure in her novel Emma, and she's a very rambling, talkative person. She'd be really good on a podcast, probably. And she says, "I can go into my mother's room, that is actually written in the text,
Yeah, it's because that does sound very modern.
And moving through the 19th century, it's a time of globalization, of expansion, of the British Empire. So the English language is gaining a lot of new words from these connections worldwide.
Yeah, and you've listed a few here for me. And I had no idea about some of these. I mean, pajamas is from Hindi and Urdu, I understand. Shampoo from Hindi. And safari from Swahili. So yeah, you can definitely see the influence of empire there, can't you?
Absolutely. And into the 20th century, we start to have something called RP. Do you know what that is?
Received pronunciation.
That's it.
The language of the BBC.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And this originates from the accent used. I suppose it's seen as a kind of cultured accent. It originally appeared in elocution lessons, often associated with public schools, with people who've been to Oxford and Cambridge, but you see a lot of actors using it. I mean, people like Laurence Olivier, but also, Richard Burton, who actually grew up in South Wales, would have been born with a Welsh accent and speaking Welsh, but he is a classic RP figure.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Yeah, because you see so many actors, particularly of, up until maybe the 60s or so, who are you hear them when they're young, or they can still speak the accent they used when they were young, and it's totally different to their on-screen accent.
Well, it's sort of described as the Queen's English, or I suppose these days the King's English. But if we look at today and the 21st century, where is language now? Well, there are so many new words coming in all the time, often because of the new technology. So, for example, a word like floppy disk, which you remember?
I'm just thinking what was the word of the year last year in the dictionary? Wasn't it rage bait?
Yeah, things like rage bait.
Yeah, they're always social media-ified words, emoji, things like that.
And often people put words together like sitcom, which is a
Looks
TV.
Maxi.
Yeah. Sitcom though is situation and comedy.
Oh yeah, or
and
rom-com too. Yeah,
rom-com. Yeah, and these are now words that we can use, naturally in language. I mean, it's amazing, I think, if you look at millennial language versus Gen Z language. Those age groups are only, 10 years apart? And they have a completely different language that is almost kind of, you can't understand it if you're not part of it. So Gen Z, do you know any Gen Z phrases, Ben?
Oh, they actually nearly made me say one the other day. it's giving.
Yeah, it's giving.
It's giving. Like you'd say, oh, it's giving cringe.
Yeah, or it's like, I'm low-key cringe. That's another one. It's a bit basic. I'm a bit sus, which means suspicious. Slay. I say that quite a lot. But, millennial.
I can imagine you saying slay.
I do say slay a lot. But millennial, I suppose, is more like acronyms. And is that because people used to have phones?
What, like ruffle?
Yeah, ruffle, which means rolling on the floor laughing, or YOLO, which is you only live once, or FOMO.
Poor millennials. Well, I think millennials get a lot of heat now, and we're like kind of on the border between Gen Z and millennial, aren't we? I'm 29, turning 30. I think you're same age.
Yeah, 30.
Yeah. So if any millennials want to write in and defend their acronyms, defend their lingo, please feel free. Gen Z, be my guest as well. Let us know in the comments to all our videos.
And I think it's so interesting thinking about language and how much it changes. It's always changing is the key point. When we look at language today and how much it changes in 5 or 10 years, it kind of totally makes sense to me that the language would be completely rewritten in periods like the Great Vowel Shift. This is a really good example. If you take the word harassed or harassed, as some people say, right, this is a word which traditionally in Britain is pronounced harassed, like embarrassed, okay? So it would have rhymed with embarrassed. But people today tend to say harassed, okay?
Yes.
And where does this come from? Well, it actually stems from a 1970s British sitcom.
Oh, serious?
There we go, sitcom again. Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, and there's this character called Frank Spencer, played by Michael Crawford, and he has this, it's like a joke, that he had this way of speaking that was really funny. And he had this phrase, like, I'm feeling harassed. And that was a joke at the time.
Oh,
it was
and
seen
it's
as very
widely adopted.
Yeah, and now people say it, and unironically, and have no idea of the concept. So there we have an example of a cultural moment changing language permanently. And I think it's now accepted to say harassed. On a BBC newsreader might say that, I suppose.
So at one end you've got the King James Bible, and then at the other end we've got rom-coms and social media, just changing our language as we go.
Absolutely. And there's new words being made all the time. I mean, take the example of listicle, Brexit, Megxit. I mean, it is amazing how quickly they're used. I mean, I would say those words in conversation, even though they're only within the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I'd never say the word unprecedented, but then given how often the news says it, it is now kind of infiltrated my consciousness.
Well, I've actually been on a mission recently, being an author. The great thing that you can do is just start inventing new words.
I thought you were going to call yourself the Great. So I was like, well, this is excellent.
Yeah, that's the next
That's the confidence I like.
But in my first book, I wrote a book called Uproar, and it's all about an artist called James Gilray. And he had this really crazy way of creating images. It's like really surreal and wacky, like Dali sort of thing. And I just started using the word Gilraic.
Oh.
Which is a much better way of describing it than just saying in the style of James Gilray.
Well, you're like Shakespeare.
Yeah,
inventing your own.
But I think more people should. And actually, to be fair, I did look it up online. I said, the uses of Gilray, and all of the examples are articles I've written. So I don't think anyone else has ever used it.
Lots and footprint.
But hopefully it might pick up. Another one, I did a book where it was all about walking in the very muddy English countryside in December. And I came up with the word embogulated, which is to be kind of sucked into the mud. And it kind of makes sense to me. But actually, it's great fun. And I think people should make more words up.
Well, it reminds me of that Michael McIntyre sketch about, how British people constantly invent new words for basically getting drunk.
Yes.
So it's like, you might have like hammered, rat ass, and then he's like, yeah, people just go and get gazeboed today.
Yeah.
But it's true that you could say anything for that and it'd still work.
So there we go. The English language is really a hodgepodge, or hodgepodge, as Americans might say.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much, Alice. That was really, really fantastic. You've actually changed my mind a bit, because I think before this, I was a bit of a traditionalist. I thought people needed to stick to how things are spelt and how things are pronounced, because there was a right way of doing it. But I think you've showed that these things are just constantly changing throughout time. And so, just going along with whatever the authorities say isn't necessarily the right thing to do. And I particularly like the way you were about to refer to yourself as the Great. Yeah, that's one thing I take away from that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and watching on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a comment, let us know your opinion, press the hype button and subscribe so you don't miss out on Talk History to Me's future episodes. Goodbye.
Goodbye.